Welcome to another episode of the Back to School Shootings podcast. My name is David Reedman, the creator of the K through 12 school shooting database. The whole point of having the school shooting database is trying to find patterns in what's happening. I think that even though there are anomalies that change the way that we can predict or understand school shootings, there have been some pretty consistent things that have happened over the last 50 or 60 years that I've studied. In the 1970s and into the 1980s, some of the highest profile school shootings were people that had severe mental illness. They were actively psychotic. Thinking about in 1989 at Stockton, there was a man that had severe psychosis. He thought that the school was sending mind control signals, and that's why he committed a school shooting directed at that school, even though he had no connection to the campus whatsoever, and he shot more than 30 students and staff members then. But into the 1990s, there started to become a more cohesive idea that there is this person that has a grievance and anger, and they're an outsider, and that is the person who's then going to fight back by committing this horrific violence. And that was both in real life and in fiction, as Stephen King wrote a book in the early 90s called Rage about two students who commit a school shooting. And that was cited in many different school shooters' manifestos. And that all led up to Columbine. And it was this idea that there's going to be somebody in a black trench coat. There were about a dozen black trench coat school shootings before Columbine. It was starting to create an image and a template for what it means to be a school shooter. Into the 2000s, I think up through 2019 or so, there was very much this grievance-based, personally rooted attack that the school shooting is what I'm doing because I am mad at these people in this place. And I'm spiraling through a crisis where the only way that I can resolve that crisis is ultimately committing a school shooting. But things have changed in the last 2 years or so, as the rise of the true crime community, TCC, is now this through line that is connecting young teenagers to content that pulls them into this alternate world of violence. And ultimately, that can be something that gets them connected with ideology and motivation and other people who encourage them to commit a school shooting. So the perfect person to talk about this is my guest from a couple episodes ago, a de-radicalization coach, licensed mental health worker, Alexandra Herberhold. Thank you so much for coming back.
Hi, thank you for having me again. I'm happy to be here.
So last time we talked about groypers.
Yep.
And groypers are a specific subculture and group online that is in conflict with some other groups, but there are some kids who end up affiliating with them. And that kind of sits adjacent to true crime community where, people are not members of something online. They're just engaging with content. So what is true crime community?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest issues with the name is we always think of this mainstream true crime that has become very sensationalized, and many people, myself included, listen to true crime podcasts, watch movies based on true crime. And I want you to, like the listener and anyone, to just think of it as TCC, because when we focus too much on the other one, people start getting it mixed up. And the TCC is not focused on serial killers, not focused on family annihilators. It's not focused on anything like that. I believe that there are two trajectories that people follow in the TCC. And one side is people who are inspired by Christchurch. They want to live stream their attack, and they're doing it for ideological reasons. And a lot of times it's white supremacy reasons. So they want to attack a house of worship or a specific group, and they do not kill themselves in the end because they feel that they do something right. And those, you find them more on places like 4chan, Kiwi Farms, Telegram, things like that, where it's more forum boards and less images. And they speak to each other and radicalize each other. but that's not the group that I'm planning on focusing on today. So that I want you to also kind of scoot out of your mind if you're thinking of Dylan Roof or Breton Tarrant or the people that are alive because they're white supremacists. I want you to think more of the kids and young adults who are inspired by Columbine, and sometimes they attack houses of worship, but more frequently they're attacking some kind of school or a religious house of worship on the school. And a lot of them, they have become inspired by previous shooters because it's similar to a blueprint. But before I scare everyone to death, I do just want to say that the TCC, probably 90% of the people on there will never, ever, ever, ever carry out an act of violence or want to. And 9 times out of 10, most of them I have seen, I would say they're at the greatest harm of harming themselves. A lot of them have eating disorders. They engage in self-harm. A lot of them have they're having some kind of identity crisis that they're going through. They are in foster care. They have a bad home life. And so just because you see a picture of Columbine on a kid's computer, I don't want you to think that that is an indication that they're planning on an attack for the school or wanting to hurt anyone. And so I want to show everyone different signs to look for, and I want you to stack it up. Like, not just one thing is going to be the indication that something is wrong. That's why when someone has a diagnosis or anything else, you need multiple symptoms, not just one. If you come with one symptom, you can't be diagnosed with something.
And for anybody who's listening, this may be an episode that you want to watch the video version of, because we are going to go through a number of different true crime community memes that are common. And we're going to do that now. So this first one.
Yeah. So the first slide is the senior or junior pictures of the Columbine shooters. I want people to know what their faces look like because sometimes they superimpose them on other things. But the way that I categorize people in the TCC is there's people who romanticize and sexualize the shooters. So maybe they came across their picture and they found them attractive, and that is how they got into the subculture. And they may only like 1 or 2 cases, and that is their ride or die, similar to some kind of character. So for this is one of the romanticizations. The person on the left is Dylan Klebold, and the one on the right is Eric Harris. They've added little flower crowns, little cute sayings, and they're really like romanticizing how they look. And so this is something that I see posted all the time. For context, I have a lot of undercover accounts where I've been on these groups for about 2.5 years, like collecting data, trying to see things, and even having to report things sometimes.
And with this one, I think it's also important to notice like the way that it's retouched to make their skin really glow and make them, look very warm and friendly. Like if a kid is engaging with something that's been edited to make somebody who's a school shooter look even more friendly and inviting, and even kind of godlike in these, that's definitely a red flag of something going on.
Okay, so again, Columbine, this is where it starts. This is a lot of times how people, they get curious. So on the left is something that I recently saw had even been shared as early as 2014 on some of these platforms. So it's going to be pictures of the shooters as children to humanize them, and then there's going to be song lyrics over it. And then on the right, again, another thing to humanize them. I would say that this falls a bit more in the idolizing and romanticizing category. So They may think that they're cool based on their actions, feel like they can relate to their personalities or what they've been through. They feel seen when they read their journals or learn about them. But the reader, the fan, the person, they either don't believe that they're capable of carrying out an act themselves or they don't want to. So this is really just trying to humanize the perpetrators.
And for any parents that are trying to understand a meme, the one on the left side, I actually put that into ChatGPT and said, "What does this mean?" And ChatGPT, just from the image, without any extra prompting, was able to explain the lyrics and where that fit into the cultural canon of kind of the depressed teens of the '90s, and then also identify the people in the pictures as school shooters. So even if a parent feels like, well, how could I possibly know all of this, understand this context? That's something that ChatGPT was able to understand immediately.
So these are all different fan arts of different perpetrators. On the left, I know that the person who made that, they were intending on using it for a tarot deck that they were going to be doing. And that, again, is the Columbine, Dylan Klebold. In his mom's book, she refers to him as Sunshine Boy, which is why there is the sun behind him. And then the one on the other side is going to be his dark side. So he has the Wrath shirt on that he was wearing when he committed the crime. In the middle is Adam Lanza, the Sandy Hook perpetrator. One thing that I see time and time again, especially with people who idolize or romanticize him, is they really infantilize him and make him look very young, kind of childlike, baby-like, even as an adult. The top right is Pekka Erik Alvanen. He carried out an attack in, I believe it's Norway, in the early 2000s. He was heavily inspired by Columbine. He also posted videos of himself. And then underneath is going to be a more cartoonish, less real-like Columbine shooters, and you can identify them because they have the two shirts on, Natural Selection and Wrath, which they wore during the time that they committed the crime.
Yeah, and with this fan art, another interesting thing is that if you take a picture of any school shooter and you put it into ChatGPT and just say, draw this in whatever context you want, now with different AI tools and the large language models, this is something that anybody can do very easily. So it's even more simple to engage with than it was even just a couple of years ago.
So on the left is going to be a photo. I found it on an older person's page, someone who was posting things in the early 2010s where they didn't have as many things to access to even do that. So that tells me this person spent quite a bit of time on Photoshop trying to realistically Photoshop different perpetrators' heads onto this to make it seem like they're friends. So the two on the left, Columbine. The third one is TJ Lane. He is not a fan favorite, so I'm very surprised that he is in a group photo like this. There's a lot of memes making fun of him, actually, where similar, they can't sit at the table with us. And then on the right is
Can you elaborate on that?
As to why they don't like him?
Yeah.
Oh, he, during his trial was pretty egregious. He wore a white t-shirt that he used a Sharpie and wrote the word killer across his chest. And trigger warning, like what he said was awful. He turned to the parents after they gave their statement, flipped them off, and said, this is the hand that I used to masturbate thinking of the memory of killing your son, or something along those lines, talking about that. And so even within the TCC, him and then Nicholas Cruz, because Cruz's search came out after and he was searching like child porn. So both of them, there's even within the TCC a line that some people don't cross even with perpetrators. And, being mean to the victims' families is one of them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And then this uh, image on the right, I wanted to hear kind of some more context around it because two of the researchers that I have worked with in the past, Dr. Peterson and Dr. Densley from the Violence Project, when they interviewed school shooters and mass shooters who were in prison, they asked all of them, is there anybody who could have stopped this? And the answer from all of the different people they interviewed was anyone could have stopped this. And so in this fan art, you have the gray figure labeled Anon, so probably meaning anonymous, hugging Nicholas Cruz saying, you don't have to do this. Uh, where does this play into the glorification of violence versus saying like, you don't need to do this? Kind of unpack this picture.
So for me, I don't see this. So the final stage is going to be the identification, which is someone who believes that they can carry out an attack. So when I see a picture like this, my mind immediately goes to this person is either idolizing or romanticizing Nicholas Cruz, believing if someone just intervened that he is a lost soul along the way. And they've probably done a lot of research on his backstory and understand that he had a very difficult life growing up. He had a lot of challenges, and believing and kind of imagining themselves of what they could have done had they been there to help stop him, and that just kind of identifying that like the act is senseless. So the two first categories, the romanticization and idolization, both of them, most often I will see them posting things honoring and remembering the victims of crimes. And you will see in their bios, I don't condone, as in they don't condone the actions, and they're looking at the person, not the crime. However, with identification, they will often have, I do condone, and will say horrible things about the victims or how they don't care or that they deserved it or that they were justified. But similar to like what I said in the beginning, I would say 90% of people that engage with this kind of content, they don't like the crime, but they like or idolize the person enough that they can dismiss the crime in their mind.
Got it. So I think the key point for like a parent who's listening and trying to figure this out is if there's a lot of content that focuses on the perpetrator and is romanticizing and idolizing the perpetrator, that's really the red flag to look out for here, because it's not about the attack, it's not about the victims, it's about here, this perpetrator, this person that I idolize, maybe I could have saved them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So these are two very, puns about the attacks that were carried out. This is an image from the security footage in Columbine during their attack. So just making puns about how the two were really good shooters, and that after killing everyone in the library, all that was left was the magazines. I mean, to me, these are both more that I see with people who are more detached and believe that the victims deserved what is happening to them. Like they will find stuff like this really funny. Or people who have been in the TCC for a really, really long time. Or because they've been in the TCC for a long time, they have a little bit more dark humor but don't exactly condone it. Or they're super, super young. And so they just think edgy things like this are funny.
Yeah, and for anybody who's listening and not seeing the video, so this is the black and white surveillance photo from the cafeteria at Columbine, and it's just memes where you're dropping text over the image. And the first one says, Columbine must have had a great basketball team. They had two really good shooters. And the second one is, the kids at Columbine were going to the library for books, but all they got were magazines. And I think that within just kind of teenage meme culture now, there are a lot of groups and people where you just want to say like the edgiest thing to push to the absolute limit. But where this departs from that is that it's focused on Columbine rather than just general violence.
And another thing to point out is the difference between the images that are being used, right? This one is a photo of the perpetrators during their attack holding weapons. The other ones have all been like school photos. So this is where I mean the person is more focused on the act that was committed rather than the person. So these could be faceless people here. It doesn't matter to them. Like about Dylan and Eric. It's just that two people carried it out. And that's what's funny. That's what's interesting. Like that's what's drawing them. So also if you see stuff like this on your child's phone, computer, taking into account what kind of images are there? Is it a bunch of weapons or is it a bunch of just pictures of the person? Yeah, so this is going to be, again, the romanticization, identification. The left is someone drew a sketch. There are a lot of photos that Dylan Roof took of himself, and he loved his cat. And one of the pictures, he's holding his cat, and he said, the writing on it says, "My old friend, you won't think about me every now and then." And it looks like that was made in does that say 2016 at the bottom? I can't tell.
Yeah, it looks like it.
And yeah, so that's, again, they're humanizing him, even though he's holding a gun, because it's a mirror of the images that he took of himself. Like, he doesn't look very menacing. He's not looking at the camera. He's holding a cat, and he's like small and wearing a cutoff shirt, and he's in his messy room. That's humanizing him as a person rather than a perpetrator. And on the right is going to be Samantha Natalie, which is what she preferred to go by, Rupp now. She has become extremely popular in a variety of ways. Some people idolize her where they think she's really pretty, so they'll make art of her, they'll make compilations of her, share all this information about her. I have unfortunately seen a lot of sexualization, like very, very graphic about her, fan fiction. I don't condone what she did at all, but it is very disturbing to see so much sexual violent fan fiction written about a 15-year-old girl circulating online since female perpetrators are much more rare, and the fact that she was conventionally attractive. She's wearing a KDFDM shirt, which is a nod to Columbine. That was a band that they liked that is very much associated with them.
Yeah, and the picture and creating the fan art, that was a picture that's also been mimicked in real life by other school shooters. And I think that the phone directly next with the Columbine t-shirt and then kind of staring, kind of this empty gaze at the phone, that's what they've all tried to emulate with that same picture. And I think it's important too to, underscore that it was a girl who committed this shooting. And there have been women who've committed school shootings back to the 1970s. And I've heard presentations where people say, no, this is, something that is only adolescent and young men, but it's not. This is something that women are capable of. There's an averted case that the details of it are pretty grim, but it was a teenage girl, and she thought that committing the school shooting would be the way that she would end up with the Columbine shooters. And she had sexual fantasies about them, and she thought that committing the school shooting would be this act that would, endear them to her, and then she would be able to, have sex with them for eternity. So there's quite a bit wrapped up in all of this.
Yes. Yeah, and I do want to echo the female school shooters as another person similar to David that has been tracking things. The female attempts have gone up quite a bit. What I will say is the reason we don't hear about it is because they're not very successful. Like, they get stopped way faster, or they have second thoughts once they get to the school. But the intention is still there. And I've seen many. In one of the presentations that I do, I have an entire slide that's just like 20 images of different girls that have all either carried out an attack or attempted to. And I ask the people to look at it and tell me, do you just see like a sweet, cute girl because they shot people and they were planning on shooting people, or they killed a family member before they attempted to go to school and do it? So although the percentage is lower with girls and women, it's not zero.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of them have very clear plans. I'm thinking about in 2021, there was a shooting at a middle school in Idaho, and it was a 12-year-old girl who committed the attack, and she had 2 handguns, multiple extra magazines, and she wrote in her journal that she hoped to kill 30 to 50 people and wound 100 more. So she was very determined to commit a major attack, but she was also a 12-year-old girl. And when she opened fire in the hallway, a teacher just grabbed her in a bear hug and took the gun away. So that is where that ended. But had the situation been slightly different, that would have been a very severe school shooting.
On the left, it is going to be a photo of the birth of Christ in the manger with Mary and the kings that come and visit. The baby is, someone has photoshopped faces very poorly on this. They were not trying very hard. They wanted it to look like a meme. They wanted it to look funny, not realistic. So I think that that's important. But if you look at this, the baby is Adam Lanza. I don't know if that's supposed to have a double meaning because he killed a lot of really small children. Eric Harris is going to be Mary. And then above, we have Dylan Klebold, we have Patrick Cursius, and then Robbie Hawkins, which people don't talk that much about. He opened fire at a mall. And then Patrick Cursius, he falls under the Christchurch attack. He's still alive. He wanted to kill people based on their skin color in Texas and killed 20 plus people in a Walmart. But everybody else in the image, they fall under the Columbine, and they all are deceased because they killed themselves during their attack.
Yeah, and I think the imagery is interesting here too, having the Columbine shooters, be Mary and Joseph, and that, they're kind of the origin for all of the modern school shooting, imagery and worship and fandom.
Yeah. So all of these are going to be sketches that people spent a lot more time on the Columbine perpetrators. One way to identify specifically Dylan Klebold. In the middle is there's some footage of him in a theater when he was working at school to do lights that circulates quite a bit, where he's wearing this custom-made shirt that says AOL Elite Dude and other stuff. So seeing that can kind of be an indication. The backwards hat with the B on it and the laced up black combat boots, which is what is in the sketch here. It's very hyper realistic to what he looked like. But on the left, we have another humanizing thing where people have romanticized him. And part of the issue is the misrepresentation in the media, the misrepresentation in books about Columbine, that Dylan Klebold was just a victim, a little bystander, and everything had to do with Eric Harris. But as someone, who's been researching in the TCC and read lots from their journals, we later find out that Dylan was the one that came up with the plan originally before he even spoke about it to Eric. And you'll see that a lot where people hate. There's a specific book called Columbine, and that author gets just railroaded on the TCC. But one of the things that they do romanticize when you think of Dylan Klebold as just a victim and an innocent bystander is the idea that he was self-harming and that he was just suicidal and he never had homicidal ideation, which isn't true. And on the left, the image, he has cut himself all over his wrist and is bleeding into a bathtub. So really nailing down the he's suicidal, not homicidal, he's the victim kind of thing, to continue to humanize him. And then we have Eric Harris, who is always portrayed as the bad guy, the one who wanted to carry it out and coerced Dylan and the psychopath and everything else, holding a firearm, because that is the way that he wanted to be portrayed through his writings and through the things that they uploaded. But, there's a lot of humanization in the TCC, and people do a lot of deep research on the shooters and all those kinds of things. So I think that this is an interesting collage of photos.
Yeah, and there's certainly, really religious Christian undertones to, almost all of this fan art. But I think also, having the Columbine shooter kind of bleeding from his wrists, kind of arms slightly outstretched. It has, a lot of, crucifixion type of, somebody being your savior type of imagery.
That is a great point that I had not thought of before. So this is a very, very, very cartoonish depiction of different perpetrators. I'm not even sure who the last two are, to be honest, because they're so plain.
I think the one on the right is probably Natalie.
You think? I mean,
tough to tell.
Yeah. I know for sure the first four is Adam Lanza, Salvador Ramos, who was the perpetrator of the Uvalde shooting. Again, he's another perpetrator that's not super popular because of choosing young children. For some reason, Adam Lanza is exempt from that, to where people are completely fine with him. But I do see people romanticizing Salvador Ramos because they feel that he is very attractive with the way that he looks. So you'll see a lot of like heart images and stuff like that, but not a lot of people identifying or idolizing him. And then the other two are the Columbine perpetrators.
And with these images, something I experimented with is I just put this picture into ChatGPT and said, can you make some cartoons with these characters? And it would immediately create panel cartoons, create stories. So I think the way that, AI is going to kind of change this TCC space and this glorification of school shooters is now, you could use Sora to make a video and mini movie about them. You can create endless amounts of memes. You can create your own comic book panel cartoons, but these images might look pretty innocuous to an adult who doesn't pick up, the little clues that are in there.
Yeah. So this is an older image, again, from the early 2010s that I found a while ago. They made a lot of different edits, but this is specifically of Dylan Roof. I believe because people find him physically attractive, that is why he's more grouped in with the Columbine shooters. For some reason, even though he's alive, did it for ideological reasons, racist reasons, so he should be more in the other category, but he is a very prolific person in the TCC. And this is just like an image where I don't know how to describe this, to be honest.
Yeah. A disorganized combination of colors and imagery and bottles and inside jokes, the rice-a-roni, the absolute vodka, the the back kind of looks like the old VHS tapes starting up maybe a nod back to the Columbine tapes, and then this idea that he's the victim because he's voted most likely to die alone. So this is somebody that everyone else had given up on.
Yeah, so this is one of the many images that I've found where it looks like someone either used an at-home printer or they went to somewhere like Walgreens and uploaded images of Dylan Klebold, one of the Columbine perpetrators, which some of them are some senior photos. Some of them are from their homemade tapes where it's little clips of them standing outside when they were firing off a rifle. One, they did a school project called Hitman for Hire where they made a skit. And that's probably the most common clip that the media will use because in part of it, they get very close to the camera with their face and they're like yelling into the camera because they're supposed to be scary hitmen. There's an image of him going to prom with his date and he's putting on her corsage outside of their home before they leave. There's also the image of them in the cafeteria. And then finally, if you haven't seen it, there was an image that was released to the media at the behest of the police department through the news that was the image of both of the perpetrators in the library after they had shot themselves and were dead. And that image is very romanticized. I see a lot of art of it. I will see people where they get keychains made of it, of just the regular image, where I think this is another thing similar to what I'd spoken about last time was within these groups, we see a lot of gore in different ways, regardless if it's they're watching the surveillance footage or live stream of an attack, or they're just on websites that promote gore. So they become more desensitized to it. So it's easier to look past someone's actions of carrying out an attack if you're constantly bombarding yourself with videos and images of gore content. So these images is just more fan art. The first one is, I'm assuming, supposed to be Dylan Roof sitting at a computer, and his head is leaned back and looks like there's some kind of spirit imagination kind of thing that's coming out of his head. And then the other 4 images are all of Adam Lanza, the Sandy Hook perpetrator, but drawn differently. Some of them are made with AI on a computer. One is a pretty cartoonish hand sketched with a pencil not colored in, and one is a very anime-like image that is partially colored in with markers. So just
In the image on the left, I mean, what struck me is somebody's trying to send some kind of deeper message in this, because on the laptop in front of him, in the window, you can see there's a gun and there's a hand with a heart on it holding the gun.
Oh.
And it's pointed at him. So I think it's almost like something in the internet was what, shot him in the face. And now his spirit is like being released everywhere. I mean, maybe that's just my own interpretation, but there's quite a bit going on in these. And I think that, anybody who's taken a class in modern art or postmodern art and so on, there are a million different ways that images can be represented. But I think if you see things like this that, your kids are engaging with, a conversation would be, what do you see in this? What about this picture made it something that you wanted to put as a poster on your wall? What is the message it's telling you? And having that conversation would be a way for a parent to see if somebody is it's just an innocent random photo, or whether it's something that's a warning sign of trouble.
So the final image is a cartoon image that has a lot of different indicators that are all different nods within the TCC culture and nod to a lot of different perpetrators. So the image is a cartoon girl. It kind of reminds me of South Park, who it's a POV and she's typing on a keyboard, leaning over the desk, headphones on. She has a Wrath shirt on, nod to Dylan Klebold. She's wearing a heart necklace that looks like it has Elliot Rodger, who perpetrated the Isla Vista shooting. There's an ongoing sexualized joke regarding the white monster, where people will insert a perpetrator's name and say, like, I want that white monster in me, as like a way to sexualize them. To the bottom right is Ember. So that is from a show called Danny Phantom. And there was a perpetrator, Randy Stair, that was obsessed with her and would draw her all the time and believed that when he died, they would be reunited in the afterlife. And so anyone who really identifies with that perpetrator will really like that one. In the background, there is the poster for a movie called 0 Day, which is a fictional movie that someone made that is similar to Columbine. It kind of looks like at-home tapes the way that it's filmed. It's very, 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 very popular. People believe it's the best adaptation of the Columbine shooting compared to other movies. So people really will see people very obsessed with the two main characters in the same way that they are with Eric and Dylan. The names are Cal and Andre. And so they will have a favorite and be very obsessed with them. Also in the background, there looks like a firearm that is leaned up against the wall. And to the left is a picture of this person named Nikita. They call them the Animaniacs. I don't know as much about them. They're not shooters. They film themselves, two boys film themselves killing and stabbing a bunch of homeless people, I believe in Russia. But for some reason, they also are considered in the TCC, and they're like one of the top favorite people that people just are so obsessed with them. And I think part of that is, one, they find them physically attractive, but two, when two people commit a crime, it's more rare. And then it's similar to a show where you can pick your favorite character, because a lot of these people are not truly seeing these perpetrators as people. They're seeing them as characters that they can identify with, or that they can like, or create a story in their mind of what they're like or how they could be or what could be different.
And then in the text on the top, since it's a meme, it's saying she's defending TCC online, exclamation, question. Is this a meme that somebody would drop in to mock a TCC member in a message board?
Mm-mm. No, this is something that someone in the TCC would post, making fun of people that make fun of the TCC.
Got it. Okay, yeah. What made me wonder about that is, you see, after a lot of police-involved shootings where there's some clear fault, when Bad Bunny was announced as the Super Bowl halftime show, there's a meme of like 25 people in sunglasses in their car, with a selfie, saying, getting online to defend cops, or getting online to hate on Bad Bunny. And this seemed like it has some parallels of an image that represents all of the pillars of what it means to be TCC, kind of all encapsulated into one place.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, the line, she's defending TCC online ? It's supposed to be very reminiscent of like a news headline in a paper, and like kind of just like mocking the sensationalism of like media, in that being like, oh, look at her, she's literally just in her room with the posters on her wall and she likes all these things, but like she's not going to do anything, kind of thing. Where you see a lot of that, where they will point out that someone hears that they have an interest in Columbine or with a specific shooter, and the person immediately jumps to the conclusion that they want to carry out a shooting. And so that is also an ongoing joke in the TCC, because people find it funny because they know they would never do that.
And just to, explain how, serious this is, this is not theoretical. The last 7 school shootings back to January 2024 all have connections to TCCs. So at Perry Middle and High School in Iowa in 2021, the 17-year-old that committed that was part of TCC and had all of the Columbine kind of fandom um, signs. At Mount Horeb Middle School in May 2024, a kid who said he was addicted to school shootings. He tricked his parents into taking him to the site of another school shooting. At Appalachia High in September 2024, that was another student. He'd been posting online. His Discord username was translated to Lanza, and he had a shrine in his room with school shooters, including Nicholas Cruz. At Abundant Christian Life, that's Natalie Rutnow. She was, strongly into TCC. She was posting on statuses of other mass shooters. She was wearing the Columbine themed T-shirts in pictures at a gun range. At Antioch High School in January 2025, this was a 17-year-old student, and he was connected with Natalie Rupnow online. And you can see that picture I talked about, the one that's iconic of her holding the phone up and taking a picture in a mirror. He has exactly the same picture, and he posted that right before his attack. At Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis in August, the same online engagement and a lot of visual pictures and drawings and biblical imagery. And then at Evergreen High in September, this was a 16-year-old student. He was part of Watch People Die. He was part of TCC. He took a picture that mimicked the Antioch High School shooter wearing the same mask. But I think something that's important about each of these is when you look at these kids, they're all kind of conventionally attractive, normal looking kids. They're not, I think there's this image of the school shooter needs to somehow be a deranged monster and outsider. But when you look at these kids, they look really normal.
Mm-hmm.
So after we've gone through all of these pictures, what can a parent do about this? What do you see as a clear warning sign? Like, if this meme is posted, if this combination of memes is posted, what does a parent need to know and need to do?
If you see him posting anything online that says that they condone, that's a huge indicator. Another indicator that I see a lot with the pathway is they've never, ever, 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 ever written a handwritten journal. And then all of a sudden they're in their room all night writing in a handwritten journal. If you have a suspicion that your child could be planning a shooting, I believe that the privilege of privacy goes away. And you should look in their journal and make sure that they're not writing about being suicidal or wanting to carry out an attack, because that is something that a lot of times I feel was overlooked because parents don't want to overstep. But if you have a feeling or something happens, at the end of the day, this is your child and you need to step in and save their life. And they may be mad at you, and that's okay. Like, you're their parent, not their friend. It's okay. And so things like that, any images, which another thing that I said which I've said before is, if you see an image of someone on their wall and you're not sure who it is, take a picture of the image and open up a Google app and do a reverse image search and see what comes up. Because similar with Colt Gray, who the Appalachian shooting, he had those images of Nicholas Cruz on his wall. And maybe if someone identified what he looked like, they would know. Or if someone identified, oh, the Wrath shirt is a clear indication of Columbine. So if your child is suddenly ordering natural selection or wrath t-shirts on Amazon, which a lot of them do. It's not an indication that they're going to carry out a mass shooting, but that is an indication you need to ask some follow-up questions. And finally, the other piece of advice is, again, if you are suspicious that your child may be doing these things, I want you to remember that privacy is a privilege. Having a cell phone and access to the internet is a privilege. It's not a right. If they are engaging with stuff online that you know is bad for them, take their phone away. They don't get the privacy of all those things. If some of the parents of previous shooters would have just removed some of the privacy and regained some of the control over their child, it would have helped a lot of the parents that I work with. So I specifically work with families and individuals who were either radicalized to carry out targeted violence or they wanted to carry out a school shooting. That's one of the main things that I tell the parents is that, it's a privilege. Privileges need to be earned. And if they are showing all these warning signs, you need to do everything in your power, especially now there have been multiple parents who are facing charges because they didn't intervene and they didn't step in. And it's a liability. And then if your child does do something, that's something you have to live with for the rest of your life, and people will never let you forget.
If you're a parent and you feel like you just don't have the time or capacity, or you don't even know where to start with trying to understand the warning signs or these alternate cultures and so on, what can a parent do to just explore the very basics of what's out there in TCC and get a feel for how accessible it is?
Honestly, my suggestion might be to go on YouTube and watch a video essay about Columbine. If you know enough about Columbine, you will know warning signs. So if it's hard to figure out where do I start, how do I know? The most common reoccurring sign always leads back to Columbine. So if you just learn about Columbine, you will be better equipped to catch on to the nuances. But that is where I would say, start with the basics, listen to a podcast that talks about it or something. Because a lot of the available TCC stuff, it gets reported. So it's not super easy to find. You're not going to find a podcast where you can just educate yourself on TCC from the point of view of people in TCC, because that would immediately be flagged and taken down. So this does leave everyone at a bit of a disadvantage. Or even honestly, looking on Google to just read a couple excerpts from the Columbine shooters' journals, so you can kind of understand their writing. They do a lot of little sketches and drawings that come up a lot. Just kind of finding out some of the things that are associated with Columbine.
Well, maybe we're going to need to do another deep dive into Columbine and all of the Columbine specific imagery to make that easy for folks. I think a couple points that you brought up today that are really important and I haven't heard elsewhere is if your kid's writing in a journal and they've never done that before, that's a huge red flag. And I think that in a number of these cases, there's some effort by the kids to kind of go back in time from where we are now, that they've tried to get cassette tapes or they're engaging with, 90s music that shouldn't resonate with, a random kid today. That if they're writing in this journal, why are they writing? And if it's specific imagery around the journal, it's those black marble notebooks that we all had in the 90s and 2000s, but you rarely see anywhere today. What are they trying to do? And then the other piece of that is that privacy is not a given with a kid, and the amount of time that it takes to first engage with this content, but then to write a manifesto. I mean, with the Antioch high school shooter, he wrote a 60-page document and a document that was more than 100 pages long for a 17-year-old kid. That's a lot of time that would be invested into writing. So ask your kid, what are you working on? What have you been typing away on? Look at the files on their Google Drive. Why do you have a publicly shared file that's more than 100 pages? I think that that's so important, that parents need to be a little more active in these cases, and a lot of them can be prevented.
Yeah. And another thing, too, that I think is really important to touch on is like realizing every single parent that got into this situation thought that they raised their kid well enough that they wouldn't do this. So I think a lot of parents fall into the category of not my kid wouldn't do this, because they feel if they acknowledge there's a problem that needs to be addressed, that it's a reflection on them, and that means that they're a bad parent. But that doesn't make you a bad parent. What makes someone a bad parent is seeing signs, having people reaching out, and then not being able to put your ego to the side to help your child and to help the community stay safe. And there are lots of places and people that will help and want to help. And the other thing, too, is people are way, way, way more forgiving than we give them credit for. Like, the internet is a cruel, cruel place, but in the real world, in real life, people are very, very forgiving and understanding.
Yeah, and that, just because your kid is engaging with violent content doesn't mean that they need to go to prison for the rest of their life. I mean, your work is about de-radicalization, and until somebody pulls the trigger, they can be brought back into reality and they can get help.
Yeah. And a lot of what I do is coaching and working with the parents on how to set boundaries and to continually look for signs, and how to have conversation that isn't shaming and blaming the kid. And with the kids, a lot of what I do is companionship, mentorship, and getting them to engage in more pro-social activities, to re-engage with positive influences, friends, all those kinds of things that are going to help build their confidence, so that they don't feel like they need the TCC anymore, that they don't feel like they need to spend all their time online and have a parasocial relationship with a deceased person.
Well, let's hope that nobody's doing that, but unfortunately, some of them are. And then I'll just continue to harp on it because it's my area of expertise. ChatGPT and the LLMs just make this worse. And so parents really need to pay attention to what their kids are engaging with and doing with any of the AI tools, because you can not only create fan art, but you could trick these accounts into talking to you like someone else. You can create very realistic personas. You can feed training information in different ways and essentially make a Lanza or a Dylan or a whoever else to be your online friend and to talk to you. And if parents are not paying attention to what their kids are doing, there are adults that spiral down the rabbit hole into AI psychosis and think that they've made some major discovery. A kid can go down the road and think that their online GPT version of Lanza really thinks that committing a school shooting is the most important thing to do. Alexandra, I'll have a link to your website in the show notes. Many of the images that we also went over will be in the show notes in case you couldn't watch the video version. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your work on this. And hopefully, some parent out there will see the warning signs, but realize it's not over, that
Yeah.
that's the first step in getting a kid help.
Yeah, there is hope. I can tell you that there is hope. And I've worked with kids and seen kids get better and seen this just be a phase, and like it can just be a blip in their life if we intervene.
All right. Well, there's no better way to end than that.